Good morning and welcome to Informed Dissent. This is your news of the week for January 17th, 2026. This week, the U.S. Supreme Court stepped directly into the fight over sex-based protections in law and sports, hearing oral arguments in Little v. Hecox, out of Idaho, and West Virginia v. BPJ, cases that will determine whether states may continue to recognize biological sex when protecting women's athletic categories, or whether sex itself must now be treated as a suspect classification under constitutional and Title IX law. Glenn Goldis will be joining us in our second segment for some legal analysis. In New Jersey, lawmakers closed out the legislative session without passing a proposed gender healthcare shield law that would have codified protections for pediatric gender medical interventions. While the state continues to operate under executive guidance, the bill's failure ensures the debate will reopen under a new legislature. Against the backdrop of growing turmoil in Garden State Equality, the state's largest LGBTQ advocacy organization. And we will be getting into our first segment for a deep dive. In Missouri, the state Supreme Court delivered a parallel signal, upholding the state's SAFE Act and reaffirming that decisions involving irreversible medical interventions on minors fall within the authority of elected legislators, not administrative agencies acting alone. That's your news of the week, and now onto the show.
Good morning. Welcome to Informed Dissent. This is for Saturday, January the 17th. I am Jamie Reed, whistleblower from a pediatric gender center and the co-executive director of the LGBT Courage Coalition, and I will have my two co-hosts introduce themselves today.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Lauren Legere. I am the other co-executive director of the LGBT Courage Coalition.
I am Corey Cohn. I am literally a cat herder. Also a communicator and commentator on various gender perspectives, including what it's like to transition, become disillusioned, and choose a different path through life.
Thank you for sharing your cats with us as usual. Which cat was that?
That was Ichabod.
Okay. So this week's show, as usual, two parts. We will have a guest in the second half talking about the Supreme Court and our trip to Washington and everything that went on there. But we wanted to start in a different state, the state of New Jersey. I've been to New Jersey once, I think, to some place called, was it Cape May?
Yep, you were in Cape May, New Jersey.
Okay. Corey, have you ever been to New Jersey?
I've passed through it, but never deliberately been to New Jersey.
Oh, I used to go every
shade.
summer.
What's that?
I used to go every summer. It's what we call going down the shore. Go to the New Jersey beaches. Wildwood, Ocean City, Cape May. They got like a boardwalk and rides and stuff and a beach.
Yeah, that's a Philadelphia sort of holiday spot.
Yeah, going down the shore.
New Jersey is a solidly blue state, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. New Jersey also is apparently is upsetting some trans activists because it is the only blue state that does not have a sanctuary law enshrined into law. So I would like to give Lauren and Corey some backstory on the legislative side. Then Lauren, perhaps you could share what we know about some of the LGBTQIA plus orgs in New Jersey, and then we can kind of talk about what's going on in this state and if we think that this is a bellwether in any way or if this is telling us anything on a wider scale. So let me tell you the backstory first. So New Jersey does not have a sanctuary law passed.
Is sanctuary law and shield law, are they the same thing, essentially?
Essentially, yes. So these would be laws where they accomplish multiple things. Um, some of them involve custody cases. So if you have a parent who moves a child to one of these states and is medically affirming, and there's, a custody fight, that state would protect the parent who is seeking to affirm their child. Some of these involve the doctors, where if there's a previous state seeking medical records, you can't get them out of the other state. There are laws that will protect the doctors within their states if they are performing gender affirming procedures or interventions that another state can't come after and seek records or um, none of these laws have been challenged so far, but the issue is that New Jersey has not made one into law yet. So,
But they have one and they have the support for it. They just have not moved it forward. Is that correct?
yes and no. So, New Jersey currently protects these interventions through an executive action, and they have one of those anti-discrimination laws, and they claim that they interpret it to be sort of a shield law. Um, there was a 2023 executive order in New Jersey designating the state a quote safe haven for those seeking gender affirming services. But those protections are not statutory. So then a shield law was drafted. Um, New Jersey's legislative cycle is biennial, and their last cycle ended on January 12th. And what happened was they had one of these bills, they had the Democrats held enough of the votes. They could have gotten it through, they could have gotten it passed, and it simply never came to the floor for debate and then to be passed. And this has been really angering a lot of the trans activists in the states because they, in their mind, they had the votes. This is their state. This should have happened, and it hasn't happened. The a little bit of kind of the background of New Jersey. It does seem like the majority of the residents, when they did a couple surveys, it looks like for the most part, they show strong support for LGBTQ non-discrimination protections generally when asked, but if they're drilled down on issue-specific surveys like youth medical transition or sex-segregated sports, they show a much more divided opinion. Another analyst noted that trans issues just don't rank high among top issues for New Jersey voters. So, blue state, broadly liberal on quote civil rights framing, if you're looking at it through that, but they couldn't get this through. Our org has not even advocated in New Jersey. We didn't see any inroads or ways in. But what we did start to do is in 2025, we started to do some national kind of just surveying to see what does the landscape look like for these state level LGBTQ orgs. What I think is really interesting is a lot of people know like ACLU, Lambda Legal, HRC are kind of like the national level organizations, but there's this huge network. Every single state has its own LGBTQ org. They're named different. They often have pretty good, decent size budgets for their state.
Yeah, 6 and 7 figure budgets.
Yeah, and
for the smaller states, there are probably 8-figure budgets in the larger states.
Yeah, these are orgs that they network and they meet normally once a year for a conference where they send their state rep and then they all kind of pool together. But they're working in their individual states on just individual legislation. To me, this just is representative of how big of this, how what we're up against is so big because there's this like we all know there's millions of dollars at the top level national orgs, but that exists in the state level orgs too. So we started to do a little survey and just check out what are each of the state level orgs, what do they look like? And one of the orgs that came up is called Garden State Equality. It was one of the organizations that we dug into and contracted during our initial outreach. What we were trying to do is send kind of an email and say, hey, would your state level org be willing to talk to, an LGB group of medical professionals? And can we, let's chat about pediatric gender medicine. New Jersey's group said, no, thank you. We want nothing to do with you. Probably not as nicely as that. But Lauren, do you remember when we first kind of started looking at this group and we found their
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So we started looking at this group, like maybe who can we reach out to, right? We get to the there's usually a biography page of people high up in the organization, um, maybe board members or whatever. And after reading through the biographies, it was very clear that we were not going to be talking to these people. These people were not going to be talking to us. And just as a small taste of what we're up against here, I'd like to read one of the executives' biography.
Can we frame this?
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
please,
because I need to frame this for Corey. So Corey, I just want you to know, and listeners, we had found this like a year and a half ago. And there is humor in this, but we'll get into why this is really serious. But the humor, this has become one of the probably very small internal running jokes for like the past year. So
tragically.
What's the running and what's the inside joke?
Well,
this biography of this executive on this nonprofit, because it's absolute bonkers. And I would personally like to do a dramatic reading of this biography, if you guys wouldn't mind. I think our listeners might appreciate this. Keep in mind, this is someone.
Well, also keep in mind that this has now been scrubbed from their website for a reason we'll get to shortly. Okay.
Yeah. But this is someone high up in a well-paid position in a well-funded org that has direct connections to like people who are making laws in New Jersey. This person whose biography I am about to read. Becky Dale is a process of becoming love and joy. You too? Maybe all of us. Some of the components of this process so far include partnering and learning about individual and collective trauma to co-creating healing in communities, composting experience, ideas, and interactions into music, collaborating with other beings and places to make community, engaged theater, practicing coaching skills like asking powerful questions, listening deeply, being open to windows of opportunity, accompanying another, conscious relationships, acknowledgement, accountability, opening to emergence, and more. Learning about and working/practicing to undo white supremacy and all forms of domination and exclusion. Parenting and learning from children. Biking, hiking, and canoeing in the woods. Building cross-species relationships. A dog, birds, mice, butterflies, bees, plants, and more.
Not cats, eh?
Recognizing and repairing harm done, allowing and metabolizing pain and hurt and grief. Lots of ups and downs, letting go and letting come. Experimenting with new economic and system models to build equity, and practicing mindfulness meditation. This process will likely continue to include many of these things. What else may it include? The possibilities are endless. Becky works with individuals and groups engaging the wisdom of all in shared leadership and co-learning. She is currently the Self-Healing Communities Coach for Garden State Equality in New Jersey and recently served as a consultant to New Jersey Office of Resilience. From 2001 to 2020, she worked as the Chief Program Officer at Minnesota Community Caring for Children, where she oversaw community education and engagement work towards understanding neuroscience, epigenetics, ACEs, and resilience, and building self-healing communities. Additionally, Becky provides education in emotional intelligence and coaching for community resilience. She is a company member with the Wonderlust Productions, where she writes music for community engaged theater. Becky is a certified transformation coach and facilitates peer leadership circles through Propel nonprofits and independently. She's passionate about working for racial justice, environmental justice, liberation for all, and experimenting with new economic and system models that build equity. This is a real bio from someone who has actual influence, and I would like if one person could explain to me what the hell I just read.
Well, I would like to, but that's all the time that we have for today. So please join us for the second half of Informed Dissent.
Okay. No, seriously. I need to Okay, let's take the rest of the story where it goes. Okay, so this is Becky Dale, and probably for the last year and a half, every once in a blue moon, when something got really shitty or we were all having a bad day, Lauren would just say something like, "Remember, Becky Dale is a process of becoming."
Love and joy.
You too could be a process of becoming love and joy. And so this had been this weird little running joke. Oh my God, your cat, Corey. Wow. Okay, so this had been this like weird running joke for a while, and all of the sudden, about a week ago, Lauren, you brought to my attention that this organization was in the news.
Yes, and seemed to be panicking because as I recognized they were in the news, I also went back to look at this crazy bio. And most of the website was completely scrubbed of anything.
Okay. So what we went to find out is that in December of 2025, this organization's executive director, this is why this is both amusing but also not amusing at all. Christian Fusacanaro, I probably just slaughtered that name. It's not Pablamo, so it'll be okay. Christian resigned following reports that he had been arrested on child endangerment and assault charges involving a minor who was in foster care who was living in his home.
Does that mean like spanked him or something worse?
So it's something worse and something that I cannot fully explain. So Christian was arrested because there was a video
From inside the house.
inside the house, and apparently there are video cameras that had been set up inside the house. And Christian, in the video, pulled the younger foster child out of bed and slapped him around and beat on him and threw him up against a wall.
But wasn't it like Christian like literally got like popped out of bed in the middle of the night?
Yes, like just pulled the
went
kid
into
out
this
of
kid's
bed,
room and started beating him up. And it's all on video because he has his whole house under cameras.
which there's something really
Very normal.
Yeah, very normal. But I mean,
Very-
honestly, I mean, of course. But I mean, go ahead.
Okay, so the charges were not publicly disclosed for several weeks after the arrest. Once the media coverage emerged, the organization placed, this is the executive director, placed him on leave and then accepted his resignation. Questions followed about internal oversight. When did the board members become aware of the situation? Again, as Lauren said, they had scrubbed their whole website. They scrubbed out basically all of the other bios and individuals who had been on the board. This is a really big organization in New Jersey. There were some reports showing that they had received a couple $1 million in state level grants.
Wow. That's taxpayer money.
It is
Yeah,
taxpayer money. And this
exactly.
was one of the largest organizations that were pushing for this sanctuary bill to be passed in the state of New Jersey. I was really troubled by this report and what it really started getting me to think about again, because, you know, we had been thinking about how absurd this bio was. And I'm just going to say this, Becky Dale was probably the worst of the bios on the website, but
But
Lauren,
they were all bananas. They were all the same gobbledygook, like not saying anything. Um, every single one of them, I think, said something about white supremacy and trauma and
half of the board are they, them
yeah.
pronouns. Um,
Also, pretty sure Becky Dale's a man. Just putting that out there.
I don't know.
And the name itself, Becky Dale, in this person's own biography is in
Is in
quotation
quotes.
marks.
Okay.
So,
I just spent way too long reading every news article I could out of New Jersey about this org, who knew what when, how did this happen, where do they go from here? And I just kept thinking about how, follow me if you could. This is an organization whose internal culture had been trying to reach this, like what they saw as this pinnacle of moral, intellectual posturing. They
mhm.
were the intellectual nonprofit advocates. They
They're good people.
but they
Right.
probably would like call you out on like the smallest microaggression like you could ever possibly like have, right? Like that's their internal culture. And yet their executive director physically harmed and beat a foster child in his home. Like, how are we at this point where, like, have we reached the point where, you can't even see, what's the phrase, like the forest for the trees? Like they are so
Mhm.
concerned about that moral posturing that they're not even seeing, like just the basics of what is physical abuse, what is a pure, to me, then I go into the thinking like this explains to me why on some level they weren't willing to engage in just basic dialogue. Can we talk about the science around a puberty blocker and cross-sex hormones and surgeries for kids? Like to me, it went from, they have all of this abstract belief
Language. It's just
language.
language, though. It's just language. It's not actually rooted in any kind of real, like, morality or sense of duty or respect to your fellow man. Like, it's just words. Like, it's just words, and those words mean nothing, um, or their meaning can change depending on who says them and what tone they say them in. And it's just, yeah, people have made careers off pretending to be great people.
Well, and I don't, I don't know that anyone in the org had foreknowledge about what Christian, was doing in his home. But I still think that the professional incentives reward so much virtue signaling and like this ideological correctness that they've really, I just feel like so many people have drifted away from just ordinary basic accountability. Like what's,
Yeah, well, there's virtue signaling and there's actual virtue. And what's more important to these orgs is the signaling.
so the outcome, whether it is related to what happened in this LGBTQIA org or not, is that the session ended in New Jersey and they never passed their sanctuary law. And I wonder now, on some level, does this, is New Jersey now in play? Are they gonna go back and try to get a sanctuary law still passed? Um, do we continue to try to look at these state level LGBTQIA plus orgs and see, are there any other, not like, is there any other, oh, are they all being abusive, but are there any members open to having a dialogue about what is real harm versus like virtue signaling harms?
Right. Because they talk about like undoing trauma and everybody's talking about grief and becoming accepting yourself and blah blah blah, but in on the back end they're saying, you know, kids should be puberty blocked and be on cross-sex hormones and get surgeries, and so should everybody else, and no talk of the actual, like, what are these procedures we're talking about and could they not be considered harm? I mean, it's crazy. It's schizophrenic.
I've been studying on my own organizational theory for the last couple of months. And it's really interesting that you're like, this is an org theory topic that we're discussing right now. And what we're seeing is there are the values that people espouse. They say these are the values that are important to us. You read some of those from that biography, Lauren, like openness and willingness to challenge ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's one model of how people think about their values. But the other one is their theories in use or their theories in practice. So the values that they bring into the world are not necessarily in alignment with the values that they say they value. And insofar as there's a gap or lack of alignment between those two things, people become very defensive, and that they will defend their espoused values, and they will pretend like the ways that they're actually behaving are, they don't have any control over the way that they're actually behaving. That's not how they want to act. They want to act according to their espoused values. So they'll become very defensive. They'll close ranks. They won't be open to any sort of criticism or outside feedback with respect to a delta between their espoused beliefs and their beliefs in practice. And it's all organizations, but it's the degree to which it becomes a crippling problem really is up to the leadership to manage.
I wonder if that's what happened with this, that this organization that was probably the forefront of talking to legislators about this proposed shield law was just in such disarray. They didn't feel, in the current climate, they couldn't combat certain. They couldn't come to these legislators and say, hey, look, we're such great people, we should pass this law, or they were totally distracted with actually managing the fallout inside the organization.
Maybe they might not have even discussed the fallout inside of the organization.
It's possible. Yeah.
Can I read a paragraph that shook my world when I read it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is from
Are you gonna read it like Becky Dale?
No.
Yeah, can you do the dramatic reading?
This is Overcoming Organizational Defenses by Chris Ayres, which is Argyris.
Okay.
And so he's talking about organizational defensive routines. And these are ways that organizations practice skilled incompetence, which is another.
I have skilled incompetence.
We all have skilled skilled incompetence is how we hide our mistakes.
Okay.
How we help cover other people's mistakes. Okay. So if you're not covering mistakes, what you do is you say, this thing's screwed up. Let's examine it and do a retrospective and open up all the pieces to figure out how things got messed up and then solve it. Right. The opposite of that is skilled incompetence. So organizational defensive routines make it highly likely that individuals, groups, intergroups, and organizations will not detect and correct the errors that are embarrassing and threatening, because the fundamental rules are: one, bypass the errors and act as if they were not being done; two, make the bypass undiscussable; and three, make the undiscussability undiscussable.
Wow.
We're
Wow.
not going
So
to
that's
talk
the
about it.
whole trans movement in a nutshell. Thank you.
We're going to stay focused on the positive. We're not going to talk about what happened. That's in the past. We're not going to focus on it. We're just going to plow ahead. We're not going to get bogged down by everything that went wrong. We're just going to do better in the future. Like, sorry, everything that we discussed just reminded me so much of that paragraph. I had to share it with y'all and with our audience.
Wow. Okay,
We
so
can't, it's this, and it's this, and it's this, which I covered my ears and my eyes and my mouth for anybody who's
Yeah. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil.
That's it. That's the defensive routine for these organizations.
La 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 la, it's not happening. Great.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm changing my bio on our website to this. Word for word. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Word for word.
I want to bring in a really random pop culture reference and see if this ever is applicable or if there's a way orgs could work this in. Okay. I like zombie movies and I like zombie books. And Brad Pitt was in a zombie movie. Oh my
World
God.
War Z.
World War Z. Thank you. Okay. First of all, the book was so much better. The movie did it no justice. I've read that book like 3 times. The movie was terrible. But if you've seen the movie, there is this scene where they go to, oh, I really don't want to make this political. Um, Brad Pitt is supposed to be basically going around the world looking for some sort of medical solution to the zombie problem.
Mm.
And he goes to Israel. Isn't it Israel?
Boo. Boo.
I forget. I haven't seen it in a while.
He goes to Israel.
Yeah.
And Israel was doing like they were fighting the zombies. Like they were like the one country basically still standing because they had built this wall and like they responded really quickly at the beginning. And there's this scene in the movie where he's talking to like one of the soldier guys and he's like, "Well, how is it that you responded so quickly and you built this wall and you knew to respond quickly?" And the guy said, we had this policy in our organizational structure always from the beginning that if every single person says, "Nope, can't be possible. Nope, you're wrong. Nope," or if every single person is saying, "Yep, you're right. Yep, this is amazing and great," that there is one person whose job is to always argue. Like they're set up in the role to you have to argue the opposite and make us look at the other possibility. And in the movie, he said, all of the 11 people were like, "There's no way there's this zombie apocalypse coming. There's no way these stories, that we're hearing out of China or whatever are true." And the guy's role is, "Nope. We have to assume that they are true. And if they are true, what do we do about it?" And that's why they built the wall and responded so quickly. So, all of that weirdly to say, I wish there was a way in organizations that they have somebody like, imagine if in the state level LGBTQIA org, if they had somebody whose job was,
To play the devil's advocate.
to say, what if puberty blockers are harmful? What if this, what we're hearing in like, from this other, what if it's possible that we have this wrong? Like,
Mm.
I want there to be, I just wish there was a way that we could have that person set up and exist in orgs like that.
Yeah. What if puberty blockers are okay?
Yeah. what if what if the evidence out of, a well-defined study works out?
I can hear Lauren's blood pressure going up. The
Oh, you can
microphone
ask.
is that well tuned.
Well, but this is the thing is our particular point of view is that questioning voice. Like we're only here because we did already interrogate and question what has been shoveled down our throats as good and beautiful and natural and just the new gay and being your authentic self. I mean, we are precisely in the positions we are in because we were that voice that said, well, what if what if you're wrong? I mean, when I first started when I first really started digging into this stuff, I was looking for something to prove me wrong. Because I really wanted to be wrong about all of it.
But you found out or realized that you were not.
The more I dug, the more I was just like, okay, I'm not wrong. And it's worse. It's way worse.
I don't have 100% confidence about what the best outcome or the best policy is, but I am confident that the direction that we have been going up until recently was bad. It was hurting a lot of people, and there were no brakes. There were no safety mechanisms. There were no off ramps. It was just 100% full steam ahead, and I knew that that could not be correct.
But do you feel like do you continue to interrogate your position?
Well, I am always open to new information. It's just been that in the last 5 years, when there are uh, pieces of information that seem to support the affirming side, the research itself or the arguments themselves are, or the data itself is faulty,
Yeah.
right? So you want to interrogate the quality of the claim, and the quality of the materials that make the case for gender affirming care is trash quality. That's not to say that the quality of the materials criticizing it are perfect. It's not, but you have to take the position of being skeptical of taking action, because inaction can be its own harm, but action is making a choice to potentially cause harm. So the like the null hypothesis is we don't need to do anything. You don't have to give kids puberty blockers. You don't have to give teenagers surgeries, right? You have to make the case why those things are needed in order to take those actions, and that case hasn't been made.
Yes, it's to me I always go back to Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. I mean, I feel like her um, argument was always you don't exactly what you're saying. You don't do the action. Um, do you know Rachel Carson? Silent?
Yeah,
I don't.
No? Oh,
it's a bit of a controversy, actually.
what's the controversy?
Some of her claims were about environmental damage were perhaps not very well sourced themselves.
Okay. I think that the concept, though, what her art, I think the basis of the argument was you don't put something into the environment or make the change until you can prove that it's safe.
Right,
That is the kind of core structure
right.
that I always look back on. Because Lauren, she wrote this book, Silent Spring, in 1962. It came out, and she was looking at Silent Spring was referencing the songbirds, the loss of the songbirds dying because of the use of DDT, a pesticide that was, I think, rolled out around World War II. Um, it's just it's to me it's just a framework of no, you don't roll out a new chemical into the environment and then wait. The chemical companies want to put it out and say, "Oh, we're selling this. You prove to us that it's dangerous."
Right.
I, I always felt like what her argument was no, you don't put it out first. You prove first that it's safe, that it will not cause any harm. And I always think about that when I think about what you just said, Corey, about like trans care. You don't give the puberty blocker and then say, "Oh, we'll find out 30 years from now if it caused harm."
Right.
Like you don't do that intervention. Yeah.
You you have to have some idea of what the costs and the benefits are. And this whole like what I was just reading from the that book, the undiscussability of the mistakes, potential mistakes inside of gender affirming care. It's completely suppressed. So suppose that it wasn't us three that were trying to make the argument. Let's just say it was somebody who was maybe in WPATH itself who said, "Hey, I don't think that we've done due diligence. Let's really try to make sure that our recommendations are the correct recommendations." They'd be silenced. They'd be run out. And in fact, we know people who've been affiliated with WPATH who've been run out of the organization for asking questions.
Yeah.
Not even just WPATH, though. All of these organizations. I mean,
Sure.
the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Right. Completely defensive.
They've completely silenced any pediatricians' questions or objections. They even rewrote how you could make objections or raised questions to silence some people who were making objections and had questions about gender affirming care.
If
That's exactly what happened to me working in a gender center, though.
Yeah.
They were like, "Stop asking questions. Stop saying there's concerns."
if they were confident that they were going the right direction, they would not be so defensive.
Do you think it's like they're internally confident or that they know?
Well, the hypothesis from this author is that people have skilled incompetence, which means that they become so skilled at hiding problems and covering up issues that they do it unconsciously. They're not deliberately hiding problems. They have just become so skilled that it's become a reflex.
Does the author recommend a way out
Yes.
beyond the zombie apocalypse theory that I have?
Yes.
What's the way out?
Well, it lines up with your zombie apocalypse theory.
Right.
It requires deliberate leadership to start navigating people out of those thinking structures where you're constantly covering up mistakes.
Got it. Yes. Yes.
And that's precisely why we had this idea to reach out to these smaller statewide LGBTQ organizations, right? Like in a way, we were kind of like trying to throw them a life raft. Like, listen, why don't you talk to us, engage with integrity with the questions that we have, with the concerns that we have, and maybe you can kind of save yourself from the inevitable here because
They're not ready. They're still in defensive mode.
Right.
Outsiders aren't going to shake them out.
And the amount of money that they receive, number one, serves as an incentive to keep doing what they're doing, but also gives them the
100%.
financial backing to push further and further and dig themselves in deeper, honestly.
Correct. That's why we have to starve the beast.
Yeah.
How do
Well, if anybody's listening, starve the beast by giving us some donations. We could use it.
I don't think that's a very good pitch.
I know. We're not the best at that.
No.
The pitch.
Look, I'm trying. I'm trying.
No, but I mean, even last week, didn't Bill Gates have to give his ex-wife another like 45 bajillion dollars, and didn't she immediately turn around and give it to?
Oh, I think it was Mackenzie Scott. I think that's Bezos's ex-wife, and she turned around and gave something like ridiculous, like $45 million to the Trevor Project. Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
she's given hundreds of millions to LGBTQIA plus missions.
Right. Maybe that's who we need to start
Lauren,
reaching out
you're
to.
correct. It is Bezos' ex-wife.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Scott.
Yeah.
I was
Can I
Mackenzie, if you're listening.
can
so
I
who got her ear?
speaking of defensive routines, could I make a criticism of one of the reporters on this beat for a moment here?
Yeah.
So there's a woman named Jennifer Bilek
Oh,
who,
oh God. Are we going there?
no, I'm just gonna just say this as a note.
Okay.
She has this, she's appeared in many, many different online magazines and news
Yes, and
uh,
she published something
platforms with the
recently.
same message over and over and over, which is here's a group of three gay or trans identified multimillionaires or billionaires who are coordinating the whole trans agenda. And Mackenzie Scott's been giving hundreds of millions of dollars for the last about 5 years now. And there's been a couple of times that I reached out to Jennifer Bilek and said, "Hey, when are you going to update your theory and include this massive amount of money that's coming in from this woman?" And she got extremely defensive and has not updated her theory at all. She just published in the Spectator this week, just repeating the same theory that she's been pitching for the last 5 years. And it's so interesting that she doesn't update it to include the person who probably has given the most to support the trans emission at this point.
Does she not? I will be honest, I don't follow a lot of her work. And I'll say this. Um, when I first came on the scene, I was somebody brought my attention to it, and I just immediately, just knowing what I knew from within a pediatric gender center, I was like, no, this is it, it was not about the dollar. I mean, the work we were doing was not, the
Yep.
hospital didn't set it up caring about making money. Like there was never a fiscal financial driver to start the pediatric gender center. And so immediately I was like, that's not my experience from working within one of these places. It didn't line up at all. So I just didn't really follow her work. But are you saying that she doesn't look into the philanthropy side?
Well, I think bringing it full circle back to what he was pointing out in his book is that she doesn't, and I'm not saying anything about her particular work because I'm not as familiar with it either, but I think what he's saying is that she's refusing to incorporate this new information because it would then kind of
It's that
upend her entire thesis.
Yep.
I don't know, isn't a good thesis meant to be challenged and potentially upended, and then
And
Yes.
yeah.
okay.
Correct.
Um, I'm gonna do a very poor pivot, but I like this phrase skilled incompetence, and I'm
Mhm.
wondering if we are thinking that it's something that will carry over into discussing with Glenna about the Supreme Court justices. I feel like the question and
Maybe.
thought process from our Supreme Court justices this week was skilled incompetence.
I'm going to put it in my bio too. Skills include skilled incompetence.
Oh, God. What are you in the process of becoming, might I ask? Is it joy and love?
I am in the process of becoming.
What?
Becoming.
Oh, you're okay. Well, that on
We're
that
all becoming. We are all becoming. Love and light. Joy.
Oh God. Well, Corey, I'm glad you were open to listening to my weird thing into New Jersey, and I'm somehow not surprised that you're in the middle of reading looks like a dense textbook.
No, look. If you had a severe constipation, you could probably finish this in one bathroom session.
The way we judge the book's length is great. All right, friends. Let's go over and let's go talk to Glenna.
Yeah.
Right.
What's next? The possibilities are endless.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Hi, welcome to our second section today of Informed Dissent. We are joined with kind of our friend of the pod legal expert. I kind of I'm starting to think of you as like my personal Nina Totenberg. Is that okay?
Ugh. Sorry. You
Well,
could do
you don't
better.
call
You
me
can
your
do
personal
better.
Dahlia Lithwick. It's
Glenna,
My
would you like to introduce yourself, please, to
uh,
our audience?
fine. I'm Glenna Goldis. I'm a lawyer in New York, and I provide personal legal analysis of cases not involving her to Jamie.
Thank you. Okay, so we need to go. We're going to start this really basic and then we're going to build up. And I'm going to explain why I think we need to start really basic because I did try to listen to this and I found this incredibly challenging. So I want to start really from the beginning. So on Tuesday were oral arguments for two cases. Glenna, can you just tell us the name of the two cases and which states they were about?
Yeah. Hecox is from Idaho. BPJ is the West Virginia case. They both concern state laws that are basically the same for our purpose. They're trying to protect girls and women's sports in the school environment. So keeping males out, including males who call themselves female. The main difference between the cases is that BPJ is a puberty blocked kid. So he supposedly has never been through quote unquote male puberty. We'll get into that. And Hecox is a man now. Even when the lawsuit started, he was in college and he never used puberty blockers. He uses estrogen and, testosterone suppressant. So
Okay.
that's the big difference is like somebody who's been puberty blocked versus somebody who's not.
Okay. And there are 9 Supreme Court justices, and I know we can all name them all, but I just want to go through um, who of the 9 we assume to be on our side going into this case. So that would have been Thomas, okay, not Gorsuch. We don't know. Okay, Thomas and Alito. Is Chief Justice Roberts assumed to be on our side?
Well, we say that on our side. So the court is split 6-3 between Republicans and Democrats. And of course, in our country, Republicans, conservatives are generally more on our side about trans issues, not always for the same reasons. They don't always understand the issue deeply. And on the court, they've issued a few decisions recently where, yes, the conservatives are generally more on our side, but that doesn't mean they're totally based. Like Skermetti, for example, last year, Chief Justice Roberts wrote that opinion, and it uses preferred pronouns, and it kind of speaks in the language of trans activism, even as it says you can ban pediatric gender medicine in a state. So because these cases are pretty nuanced and they can come out in different ways, it's not just like a binary up, down, yes, no. I'm hesitant to say somebody's totally on our side and definitely going to issue a great ruling.
Okay. Who are the 6 Republicans on the Supreme Court? Wait, go, Corey.
They're appointees by Republicans. They're not necessarily Republicans themselves. Just
Okay.
sorry for jumping in. Just
because they are appointed for life, they also might, I don't know how many times people's political alignment changes over their lifetime. I've experienced it a little bit myself, so maybe some of these justices might have that experience. But who are the appointed by Republican justices?
Thomas, Alito, Roberts, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett.
Okay. Barrett being the only woman in the Republican appointees. Okay. And then on the other side would be the 3 other women, Sotomayor,
Yeah.
Jackson, and Kagan.
Kagan, yeah.
Kagan. Okay. And what is it that we should know about Gorsuch going in?
So Gorsuch drafted a famous opinion called Bostock in 2020, this was the trans movement's big win in front of the Supreme Court, where he said that quote unquote being transgender was protected under employment law, federal employment law. So employers can't fire someone for quote being transgender. And he doesn't explain what transgender is. He doesn't define sex, but he says, he kind of walks around the issue. And it's a very confusing opinion. It's just vague. It says, look, this isn't about bathrooms. It doesn't get into the question of pronouns. It just says you can't fire someone for, quote, being transgender.
And I have read one analysis saying that he was maybe new at this when he...
Oh, so our side gets into like a lot of wishful thinking. We're like, yeah, he made a mistake in 2020, but now he gets it and he feels bad. I don't know. I think he's very proud of Bostock. And I don't think it's because he wasn't that new. I think he decided it very deliberately. Like, yeah, he wanted to give a win to trans and gay people too, by the way. Gay people are in that decision as well. So he wanted to give the win to the LGBT community. He thought he was drafting it in a narrow way, for example, by not getting into bathrooms and by not defining anything. But what he was actually doing is just writing something really vague and confusing that the ACLU ran with and that the Biden administration ran with and tried to interpret in all sorts of ways that were inappropriate. But yeah, all that being said, I don't think that Gorsuch regrets it. When you hear people say that, I think it's wishful thinking.
Okay. And Roberts is the Chief Justice, and Roberts can either write the opinion for the majority, or can he assign it or let someone else? Explain who gets to write opinions.
So once the justices figure out where they stand, then within each group, the justice with the most seniority gets to assign the opinion, and they can assign it to themselves if they want. So he's the chief, so that gives him the most seniority, and we assume he's going to be in the majority, we're hoping. So then so this is what happened in Skermeti. He assigned it to himself.
Okay. And so if this falls upon party lines, we could expect a 6-3 vote. I also read something today where they were thinking that there might be a 6-2-1 where Sotomayor and Jackson, I believe, might write, and then Keegan sides with them but doesn't.
So of the liberals, Jackson and Sotomayor are more dogmatic, and like you can just tell in arguments that they care what the left thinks of them, basically. And so they're just like the hardcore like resistance libs. And then Kagan is like a more nuanced intellectual type of person. And her opinions are smarter, and they don't always fall along these predictable party lines. And so there's more speculation that she will not just, swallow the Democratic Party line on boys and girls sports. She wrote a slightly diverging concurrence in Skermeti, and then this time around on Tuesday, we heard her asking questions about a lot of sort of technical legal issues that flagged for me that she might be hoping to draft a decision where it's like a concurrence. She's concurring with the conservatives, but on different grounds. And she's just being super technical about it and saying, look, I believe the boys are girls, but because of this reason having to do legal precedent and abstract questions and blah, 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 and like not really touching the central issue, like for that reason, I have to vote with the conservatives. Like it seems like she could do something like that.
So it could even be a 7-2?
Yeah, that's possible.
Okay. So Aaron in the Morn wrote a piece saying that it was his assessment that, or thought that the right might lose Barrett on this.
Was that based on questions she asked?
I don't.
Because she has a questioning style, and she said this, where she believes that she uses the contested language of trans activists. So she used the word cisgender, and her tone of voice is often sympathetic when she's asking a question. But then she'll turn around and, issue an opinion that's very contrary to them. So I think people get excited about what she's doing, and they're really just misinterpreting.
Okay.
Yeah. So she like in Skermeti, she asked questions about, everybody was freaking out after Skermeti based on her questions about like the history of discrimination against trans people. Yeah, and then she wrote a concurrence. I was like, there's no history of discrimination against you people. I'm not giving you rights. It was really harsh. And I'm still hopeful about her because in Mahmoud, if you remember from last year with the trans books for kids, she had these lines where she was like, hey, you guys are teaching this stuff like it's 2 + 2 and it's not. like so she gets that there's an ideology at play. So I remain hopeful about her.
Okay.
So
Go ahead, Lauren.
I was just going to ask if Glenna could break down for our audience what this ruling will establish, what it will not establish, any kind of variation in between, like might they do X, Y, and Z? What are the parameters around what these rulings could actually mean?
It could be super small or super huge. It's totally up to the justices. So, I mean, the question before them is, are these laws protecting girls' sports at the state level, are they unconstitutional? And do they conflict with Title IX? So they could find the easiest outcome and hopefully the most likely is like, they're not unconstitutional. It's fine. You can protect girls' sports and they don't conflict with Title IX, which also says in a different way that protecting girls' sports is good. So like that's what we're all hoping for. They might get some of the lingo wrong, whatever. But then there's all different ways it could go. Like, I mean, the ACLU had a line in there where they're like, Title IX doesn't require separated sports by sex. So like if the ACLU gets what it wants, the justices will say, hey, everyone's been interpreting Title IX wrong. It doesn't require a girls' team, which would be huge. And again, that's like an extreme outcome, but you can imagine like maybe the liberals team up with the libertarians. I don't know, like that's kind of dangling out there as a thing to be scared of. And the ACLU is saying don't define sex, which is wild because sex is contested in this case. And they're like, look, other words have gone undefined before. And it's like, well, not when they're being directly contested and causing this like nationwide culture war and everyone's filing lawsuits about it, which are the subject of what we're talking about right now. Like,
aren't they bringing the case based on sex discrimination?
Yeah, yes, they are. That's correct.
Okay.
And so like several justices were like, you could tell it was such a crazy thing the ACLU was saying that the justices were like trying to get their bearings. So like Alito kind of saw it coming and he had like calculated a certain line of questions that were smart, where he's like trying to nail them down. He knew they were going to try not to define sex. But Roberts is just completely gobsmacked. And he's like, oh, you're not really saying you don't want to define sex. Oh, you are saying you want us not to define sex. But you mean you're not really saying. Like, it's just like a really funny colloquy. Because that's never, you don't like that. It's so basic that it's never taught in law schools or anything that you need to define the word if you're wanting it to be interpreted a certain way. If it's the basis of your client's rights, then you need to talk about what it is.
One would think.
Yeah. So we could enter a world if the ACLU gets what it wants, but like nobody knows what sex is. That could have serious ramifications, not just for school sports, but for every kind of sex discrimination lawsuit. So just like employment law, if you're trying to bring a lawsuit saying my employer discriminates against women, well, you can't say that anymore. The ACLU, they didn't say it in this case, but in other places, they've given what they want sex to mean. And they actually did go off on a tangent and say what they thought sex should be in the BPJ. And then they were like, just forget we said all that. We actually don't want you to define it at all. But what they want sex to be is sex characteristics and things connected to sex. So not sex, but, and the example they gave, Joshua Block for the ACLU gave one example of what he meant by a sex characteristic that could be the basis for a sex discrimination lawsuit. And that was, again, so it's not like being a man or being a woman anymore. Instead, what it is, he says, is having limp wrists. So he says that sex discrimination, his one example of what like a good sex discrimination lawsuit is that the boss says, I'm not going to hire anybody with limp wrists. And the ACLU says, that's outrageous. We object. That is sex discrimination to say you refuse to hire somebody of whatever sex. We don't believe in sex with limp wrists. And then they bring a lawsuit.
But it's sex discrimination.
That's sex. Okay. That is the one example they can give of what sex discrimination. Oh, besides, so I guess two. So one example of sex discrimination is not letting boys play girls' sports. The other example is an employer who discriminates against anybody who happens to have a limp wrist, male, female, not that we believe in those words. So that's the ACLU's conception of reality here.
Okay.
And the upshot is that would be very hard to bring a normal sex discrimination lawsuit. If your employer actually discriminates against people for being women, then you can't even articulate that in the world of, it's like, people who have limp wrists, but also small hands, not for any particular reason, but uh, yeah. So I'm writing a blog post about this so I'm still sorting out my thoughts about like if the ACLU won everything that it wants, what would the world look like for sex discrimination lawsuits? And it's pretty much Armageddon, but I'm working out the details still.
So that's the worst possible case scenario. What?
Yeah.
But it's my understanding that this case specifically will say they are ruling on whether you can have sex segregated sports. They are not ruling on whether you must. Or could they also bring that in?
I think they could bring it in, but everyone's agreeing that they don't have to. And that, again, like the courts usually try to decide things in the most narrow way, so they're probably not. But that being said, they'll probably have some lines in there that would be used by advocates on both sides because these cases are proceeding through the courts related to Title IX, like throughout the country, because of, for example, the president enforcing Title IX against schools that allow trans. Yeah. So I think even if it's not like, I think there are some people who tell you, no, that is not going to happen. They're not going to rule on whether schools must. And it's like, yeah, but that question is going to be implicated.
So I have a question then. If they do not rule that schools must have sex segregated sports, then that leaves it open to, like, in my mind, what would happen was that half the states will have sex segregated sports and the other half will not. But when you're talking about national championships, like, so how would that work? Like, wouldn't this eventually have to come back to the Supreme Court? Like, won't there eventually be some kind of challenge between a girls' soccer team, let's say in Wyoming, has to play the championship out of Maine, and the championship team out of Maine is full of boys?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's definitely going to be more litigation following this. I think it's very unlikely that this case is going to solve the girls' sports question once and for all. For what you're talking about with people kind of crossing the lines between places with different rules, that might be like the Riley Gaines lawsuit that's been filed, where, she went to NCAA championships in one state, which had certain laws, and then NCAA had its own rules. And I think it might be an issue there. But yeah, you're right that it's all a cluster and sort of this time bomb.
Yeah, so I mean, eventually they will have to. Is it possible that they see that coming down the line and could have a more encompassing ruling because of that? I mean, it seems inevitable to me that if they don't rule that you must have sex segregated sports, it will revisit itself to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think you're right that they should do that, and they have enough information in front of them for them to make a decision that decides it once and for all. But just based on what I heard the other day and knowing how this issue plays out, I think they're going to just try to go as narrowly as possible and just decide one question at a time and let the science develop. And all of that adds up to not deciding it all in June and leaving some things open and saying, oh, well, we know the states have different ideas and there's some kind of that came up a few different times of like this idea that, well, maybe we want to let West Virginia be West Virginia and let Connecticut be Connecticut.
Okay. Corey, do you have any questions?
Can you name 5 female athletes?
No.
Then why do you care about this?
I like Jintae's response to this, where she was like, I don't know 5 female prisoners. I'm still really pissed off about men raping them. Like,
tell us a little bit about the strategy that the ACLU is using around this issue generally, because it seems like in the first case, in the Hecox, they were trying to withdraw the case and they weren't allowed to.
yeah, so somewhere along the lines, ACLU realized that they should not argue self-ID. So self-ID means that like if you are a girl, then
Okay, I have to interrupt you for a minute. Why don't they just say, this is what I listened to the whole transcript. Why don't they just say, we filed this case. This person, is an adult who went through male puberty. We change our mind. We don't want to argue with this case anymore because this is a bad plaint. Like, why don't
they did say that
in so many words? Is that what they actually said?
Well, so this is so they're definitely saying that the men should only get to play women's sports if they have no biological advantage. And in the puberty blocker case, they're saying this boy has no biological advantage because he took blockers. By the way, the science is against that, blah, 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 but that's what they say. But then in the Idaho case, where the guy did not take puberty blockers, they're still arguing he doesn't have an advantage. And it's like, well, why are people using puberty blockers if you can just become a woman later on without puberty blockers? So that doesn't make any sense. But they're even they're even being more ridiculous about that in Idaho, sticking to this idea that he doesn't have an advantage. The lawyer says, there's a theory that men who use estrogen are actually at a disadvantage compared to women because they have these big manly bones, but not enough testosterone to move the bones around. So they're at a disadvantage. That's crazy. But that's what they're arguing because they have no shame. I don't know what to say, Jamie.
Okay, so let me just see if I understand this correctly. So the ACLU is throwing out the self-ID argument, and they're leaning into boys and men should be able to play in women's sports categories if they have no advantage that they see because you're blocked and then given cross-sex hormones.
Yeah.
So they're willing to throw out then all the kids who are not blocked.
Yeah, and again, it's not clear because Heacock is still alive and they're still fighting it. Like, it's not clear whether they're throwing the estrogen but not blocked crowd over the boat, but
Okay.
they are definitely throwing out this pure self-ID, except for kids. So they're pretending that kids up to puberty are exactly the same, boys and girls. So I guess they would allow self-ID pre-puberty. This is because they're just classic Harry Benjaminites from they think that testosterone level is all that matters. That's their argument. That is not true. Like, our genes dictate the size of our organs and everything, our bones and our hearts. But they're pure hormone obsessives. Like, that hormones are all that matter.
Okay, but do you believe, or Lauren, do we believe that the individuals who were standing out front at the rally on their side understood that the ACLU is throwing out self-ID?
That's a good question. I mean, I think they do because the ACLU and other trans activists have been open in the media lately with saying that they will compromise on sports.
Okay, and the compromise is to utilize an intervention that's illegal in half of the states.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the very states, of course, that are banning this. So there's a practical question of, like, if these bans are found unconstitutional in Idaho and West Virginia, you're going to have, in theory, kids saying, okay, well, I'm a boy, but I can play on the girls' team because I use these drugs, but the drugs are illegal. So, I mean, I'd have to dive into the.
So I don't Okay, but the Supreme Court justices are smart and they know that. They know that they're asking to carve out for kids who are seeking to use an intervention that the science is not.
Yeah, the Supreme Court might like that fact because they're like, hey, this is moot. We're not actually affecting anything because kids in those states can't access the drugs anyway, so there aren't going to be any boys. Of course, they're wrong. Like, those kids are accessing the drugs, but the Supreme Court doesn't know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, you stole my thunder a little bit, Jamie. I do want to go back to this question around the ACLU, because a lot of these lawsuits started when the Biden administration was in power, and it looked like that there was going to be a successor Democrat administration after that. Like, nobody thought that Trump was going to get reelected, especially nobody in the ACLU.
Well, actually, these started, I think, during the first Trump administration in 2020. Heacock's definitely did.
At the state level, or
they filed Heacock's has been around forever, and they first filed in 2020. Yeah, in federal court.
All right. Well, that might challenge my assumption, but I was going to lay out maybe the ACLU thought that the judicial environment for them was going to be extremely favorable on these issues.
I think so, but also I think with the ACLU, they just have to file these lawsuits. Like, they don't have a choice. People talk about their strategic decisions and why didn't they wait longer, and it's like, well, every idea they have for pursuing trans rights is outrageous and depends on lies. Like they're not like, oh, we'll just turn around and use our moderate playbook. Like there's no such thing. The moderate playbook is it actually just boils down to like fighting for gender nonconformity, which they don't want to do because they want to throw in all the pronoun and bathroom stuff too. So, you know, like what the normal like the normie liberal in America, what they want the law to be is like protecting gender nonconformity. Like you don't get fired from your job for wearing a dress if you're male.
Yeah.
But that's not actually a trans rights thing. That's just a sex discrimination thing.
Yeah.
So for many years before this, yeah, there's a Supreme Court decision on this saying that like a woman doesn't have to wear makeup, and if she's discriminated against for not wearing makeup, then that's illegal. So, and that's not what the ACLU wants to spend its time doing. They want to be fighting for the pronouns and the bathrooms and the actually pretending someone is the opposite sex. There is no moderate version of that. That is an extreme agenda on its own. So when we talk about like, well, why did they bring this lawsuit? They were destined to lose, or that was destined to make them sound crazy. Like they don't have a choice. They don't have another set of lawsuits they could be spending their time on. This is what they want to do. This is what they're funded to do.
It's sort of like legal suicide, though, because.
But is it fundraising suicide?
Well, no. So if their goal is to make money, then that would explain behavior differently than if their goal was to cement some sort of favorable policy that they wanted.
Or protect their reputation. You know, I was reading articles in the 2000s, they were the most respected nonprofit in America, most respected like nonprofit law firm. So across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats had a favorable view of them because they stood up for free speech and civil liberties. And now at least half the country hates them. I think it's a lot more than that. You know, they're just partisan hacks. So they've destroyed their reputation already.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there is a question of what they want and whether it's money or some sort of ideology of I don't want to be conspiratorial and predict exactly what it is, but I can just tell you that there's not a moderate version of what they're doing that would make any sense. Like that's what people ask, why aren't they doing it? It's like they can't. That doesn't make any sense. That's not what trans is. Trans is not a moderate movement.
But they weren't okay. I mean, like we could dig into the ACLU a little bit, but they didn't.
Honestly, it could just be possible that their head is so far up their own asses that they can't even recognize that they're making shitbag legal arguments.
And they
That's
have
my
won a
theory.
lot. Let's be clear. Like this is what my blog is about. They keep winning cases that they should have lost, and it's like why? So yeah, we always feel so good just because we're right, but they've got something going on for them. Like they've just won a lot, not just Bostock at the Supreme Court, and then lots of appellate wins too across the country.
Yeah, they win a lot across the country in lower courts, right? Which is exactly how we got these two retarded cases. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that they think that they're losing though.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to remind myself that, like, when I'm saying how terrible they are, it's like, well, federal judges don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I had a little bit of a conversation with if you go to the ACLU senior staff page, it goes Anthony Romero, Terrence Dodery. I don't know why I can't pronounce people's names. And then it goes to this woman named AJ Hikes. She was at the Supreme Court out front. I had an interaction with her. I did say to her, you are losing. She does not think that they are losing.
She's not losing.
She also doesn't think she's a woman anymore, though, either. She thinks that she has become a mythical third unicorn because she's a lesbian who cut her breasts off and started testosterone and has a little chin hair. So that she does
her
not.
rally speech included the line, "Remember who you are." She was like chanting that.
Yes.
Remember she's she literally forgot she's female.
Yes. Yeah, it was a very lovely interaction, I will say. She was pissed that I had the audacity to walk over there and try to shake her hand and introduce myself. She was just like, yeah, very upset.
So she knew you?
She knew that she wanted to call me a racist and a transphobe and a bigot. She knew she wanted to say those things to me. Yes. So, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the actual hearings?
Yeah.
When you listened to it, it wasn't just jumble
Yeah, I read the transcripts, and so I understand what you're saying when there are parts that are really confusing because they are talking about other cases, cases that are obscure. Like I hadn't read the other cases they're referring to, and that has to do with like, the ins and outs of this area of law and how exactly to apply equal protection standards here. So yeah, and let's see. So what part should we focus on? There are, like I said, I
Well,
think Kagan likes that technical stuff. I don't know if all of them will be too.
but Hecox was okay. First of all, were these oral arguments long in your opinion? Were there a lot of questions?
I think they're on the long side. I mean, I only follow Supreme Court cases when they're like big famous ones that are probably running long. So I think we were there. I think it was like an hour and a half for each case. Is that right? We got
I
out
don't
on
know.
one.
I feel like Hecox was longer by a little bit than
Mm.
BP.
But anyway, they were engaged. They had a lot of questions.
Okay. And then BP. Okay. I'm sorry. I went and sidetracked you. Um, for the novice who tries to read this transcript or listen to it, um, how is it that the media who was covering this kind of immediately was able to say, yep, this is going to be what the vote is?
Yeah. Well, the media went in assuming that the conservatives are going to stick together and rule against the ACLU and 6-3. And nothing at the hearing happened that was like really shocking and made it, disturbed that assumption.
Anything that stuck out to you in the line of questioning?
Uh, so Alito definitely prepared for the idea that the ACLU is not going to define sex, which I thought was interesting because it's like he saw that come like I saw that coming. Like we in the movement we all know the ACLU that the whole game is defining sex and that the ACLU is very squirrely about it and they're hiding the ball. And Alito knew that too because he constructed not just like Justice Thomas, I think, asked like a point blank question, what is sex? But Alito had built up this sort of a series of leading questions that got the attorney for Hecox to acknowledge that it's important to define sex. And then he said, okay, so what is your definition? And she said, I misunderstood. I answered all your previous questions wrong. I don't actually think it's important to define sex in order for my client to vindicate his rights. So that told us that Justice Alito is paying attention, which we knew already, but he's thinking about what ACLU strategy is. That was good to see. Justice Kagan and Sotomayor were not surprising. They were themselves. They were trying to get, moments that would be quoted on CNN.
Do you really think that they care?
Yeah, I think they probably consciously think about it, especially Sotomayor. In a way, this makes sense because they are thought of as a permanent minority because 6-3, like the liberals aren't going to win a majority in their lifetime, most probably. So they're like, well, how do I have an impact if I'm always in the minority? And
I actually read a great article talking about this and how yes, they are maybe asking more questions or they're writing they're writing their dissents in different ways because they're coming to grapple with the idea that they are going to be the permanent minority for the next. Yeah.
yeah, it's very fatalistic. Like in history, like you referred to before, Jamie, like some justices have either changed sides or the courts just haven't been so partisan and always viewing every case as like left right and always coming out in a left right way. So, I mean, if you're really ambitious as one of those liberals, you would think like, I'm going to, pick off Justice Barrett on this one particular issue where she cares about an obscure legal thing and that overlaps with my interest in the social justice piece, like whatever. That's the ambitious way to go about it. And there's speculation that Justice Kagan takes that approach. But with Jackson and Sotomayor, it's like, they don't care. They don't think they're going to change any conservative's mind.
Okay.
Oh, and Sotomayor is so gross. Because she does the empathy thing. So she was just going off on, like, well, in the Idaho case, she was just going off on this Solicitor General there, like, but don't you care about the human beings at stake? You're talking about like how there are so few, but each of those people is a person. Don't you think that's meaningful? And that is like her Sotomayor's go-to when she has no logical argument to make, which is often. So she,
Yes, they're male people. They're male people,
Hmm.
male individuals.
Yeah, yes, very rude term, but
That's
so,
that's what we care about is the male part of the individuality.
yeah, she's never had a word for the people on the other end of these cases, the humanity of, yeah. So she's definitely going to write an opinion that says nothing about the girls impacted by this.
Can can I ask a question about, you brought this up earlier about language though, and it is of interest to me. So, Barrett used the word cis. Uh, When I was listening, I don't, the justices referred to, it's Lindsay Hecox and Becky Pepper Jackson. Both of them, the only pronouns I heard describing them were she, her. Did any, has any justice ever sexed a, an individual in any of these cases? Like, has Alito or Thomas ever like,
I don't believe they have. And the only time on Tuesday when I heard proper sexing was from the Department of Justice lawyer. So the federal government has a policy of using correct sex pronouns, and he did that.
so he referred to Hecox as he.
I don't know if it was he cut. So there's one point where he was talking about maybe like a hypothetical boy who identifies as a girl, and he said he.
Okay, because I was listening for that, and to me, to me, there's still something really telling that even the conservatives would never, they are not using language like we would use language. I don't know that Alito or Thomas, they might not have, they just might not have used pronouns.
Yeah, they really did avoid it.
But but for Barrett to use the word cis, is this is there like a legal faux pas or respect something that I don't understand?
Well,
Well,
she's
pronouns
assuming
are something else. Yeah.
these words, like she's assuming a category that two categories that don't exist,
Mhm.
Well,
right? So I feel like that could be problematic down the line because again, these things are only audio, only transcript, and particularly in the written word, it is to me inaccurate to be using wrong sex pronouns. I mean, if somebody reads this 20 years from now with no concept of what was happening now, they'd be very confused.
Yeah, but this tradition goes back to the 1970s, maybe the 60s. When I'm reading the really old decisions on trans rights, those judges way back then were referring to men as women and calling them she, her.
did those men have the legal right to, I mean, had they legally changed their sex then? Is there like a legal carve out here that,
No, I mean maybe, but that's not the reason that's given. So one thing I often saw, even in the old cases, is there'll be a footnote that says, "Oh, this is like the medical texts say this is the medically
oh,
appropriate pronoun to use." So there's the gender doctors just drawing on their expertise, and judges referring to the medical expertise. And sometimes they say it's for courtesy, but I think the medical thing is what really is carrying the day back then. And nowadays, it's just become aside from us, people are really, we always make fun of the conservative media like Fox News using the pronouns, for example. Like it is very baked into our culture because it's been around so long.
okay. I just, I think it's hard and it's telling that on some level we're arguing something at our highest court, and in essence they won on the language, and there's not even a consideration, there's no real consideration if the language itself is, I don't know, it's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, and you do have, and part of that is because the parties don't press the issue, and I'm wondering if the Trump administration maybe will. So one thing that I kind of play devil's advocate here about what's going on. These cases, as we said, started in 2020,
Okay.
and what happens in those early days of the case really matters. That's the record in the district court, and that's what the appellate lawyers use later on. So the people at the Supreme Court, the advocates, are relying on these decisions that were made way back then to not really challenge language, perhaps, and to not challenge the idea. So, like, I mean, if you were starting a case from scratch now, then I
Okay.
think our friends bringing those cases would say, they would challenge the idea that the boy is injured by being kept off the girls' team. They would get an expert witness to say it does not injure the boy to be put on the boys' team instead of the girls' team. Injure meaning like they don't their rights are not at stake here because they're not actually they're not actually harmed by what the school is doing, putting them on the boys' team. And you would really make that case, and along the way you would say, we're not using the pronouns, and they didn't define the word transgender and all this thing. But the cases we're seeing at the Supreme Court, they don't have any of that background to them. They were built up in the days when everybody was still getting their bearings about how to litigate one of these cases.
Okay. Okay.
And then the justices, they rely on what the parties present to them. Because in the adversarial system, the lawyers for the parties do most of the work in terms of like setting the stage, and the judges are supposed to be passive and just like asking them questions and understanding the information being put in front of them, but they're not supposed to actively go out and figure out what's up with trans rights. That would almost be inappropriate. They're supposed to rely on what the lawyers for the parties tell them.
Okay. Let's do this in the time we have left. Can you share with the listeners when we expect a ruling? How does it come out? When do people start looking for it? And then let's talk a little bit about our experiences outside. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay.
So the Supreme Court's term ends in June, and that's when they drop their big blockbuster decisions. We expect that to happen then, but it's possible that the decision could come sooner, but probably not before like April, but most likely June.
Okay. And then they release it in its written form on their website.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what it was like out front. Corey, you were the only one not there. Well, except for Ichabod and Dorian, they didn't go either, right?
Right. Sadly, none of us were there.
Okay. From your home vantage point, what did you think or see? Did you follow us on X?
I had to imagine that y'all were placed about arm's length from each other because there was so much bleed over from each other's PA systems.
Yes.
That it made it very difficult to hear the statements that were being made. And at some point, it just became too much to try to make it through all the noise. So unfortunately, I stopped listening to it because it was just too noisy.
It was very loud there as well. I mean, it was, because it was hard to focus in on any one speech because there was loud, amplified voices coming from one side, loud amplified voices coming from other. There were people with bullhorns. There were people shouting. I mean, there was music playing. It was a tale of two realities, really. It was kind of surreal in some
And I feel
ways.
like the physical distance in between is maybe 5 feet.
Yeah, maybe 5 feet. Yeah.
Oh, that's really packed in.
It was there. I think that there were more people there for this one than there were for Scrimeti.
I definitely think so, yeah.
It seemed like our crowd was bigger. There was less hostility. At least I felt that there was less hostility at this event than there was last year at Scrimeti. Like I was not called a dyke a million times this year. But it was still there were definitely tense moments there. They did not like our org's sign, our banner that we had out that they didn't like our Stop Trans and Gay Kids sign. They didn't like the banner. Our banner said, chemical castration is not medicine. Save girls' sports, save boys' bodies. And they really did not like that. They did not like it. At one point, they came over our side. They tried to crowd us out, block the sign.
Okay, but Corey, I'm sorry, Lauren, to interrupt you. I want to add this. So our side does not have its own police force. So what I mean by this is that there's the federal police, there's the police that are there, the actual police. Then we come, and then on that side, the ACLU trains up these people who are wearing yellow, like traffic cone vest things, they're not wearing a traffic cone. That's not what I meant to say.
Yeah, the safety
The
vests.
safety vest. Okay.
Mhm.
They're wearing the yellow safety vest. They have like an identifier, like name taggy thing. Like it's not even, it's like ACLU volunteer. A lot of them have medical packs on, like they're almost like look like they're dressed out to be a lifeguard. They'll have like, like medical things with them.
Yeah,
Um,
to flush the pepper spray out of one's eyes.
exactly. Exactly.
That's what that is. It's
Yes.
anti-riot.
Yes. They're
Thing.
trained. Okay, but they're trained. Um, at this event, when the when the they try to kind of hold the line, and they're not holding the line against us. They are holding the line to keep their own people in.
Oh, that's good.
And so when these individuals came over to try to block our banner, get in our face, cause a conflict, the ACLU trained individuals and came around them and then slowly pushed them back. And we're having conversations with them, telling them, no, we're not doing this. You need to de-escalate. You need to, like, they
Good.
have to police their own people.
Wow.
I
I
find
hope
it really interesting that we don't have to do that.
I'm glad that everybody on our side was well behaved, or at least I hope that's the case.
Uh, for the most part, I think so.
Oh,
But we don't have a whole system in place. And this is when we talk about like organizational structures. I don't want to I don't want to have to build that. Do we have to like
I persuaded one of our friends to stop yelling "fuck you" to the other side, and we hashed out some alternative chants. So that was my contribution.
yeah, that's not a very productive chant, right?
So yeah,
no,
I mean that had if our security problems can be handled with me, then we don't have a problem.
Yeah.
no, we don't. But is that a holdover? What is that? Why does the ACLU even have that?
Because last time in Skirmity, they were running over into our side constantly, and they shot up testosterone right in front of me. Remember that?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was not a good look for them. It was not a
Yeah,
good
we
look. And I
posted it
mean,
online because it was
again,
happening right
like
in front
at
of us.
Skirmetti, I was being called a dyke. Somebody showed up with a bullhorn when Ben Appel was taking the stand to call him a faggot repeatedly. Like, that's not a good look.
Yeah.
This year they just came with the trans flag with the Satan emblem over it.
That
Yes, I've seen it. Yeah.
And I guess they thought that was a good look. I don't know. But really, I think those people were there to make sure everybody's feelings were okay. Because I don't think if there was actually a physical confrontation, they were going to be worth a shit. Because it took them a while to, when a bunch of people crossed over and kind of crowded us out, tried to block our sign, it took them a while to like convince their friends to back off. Like they were still it took a while. It wasn't like they were like, "Hey guys, you stay on our side," No, they had to like crowd them out. We had to crowd them out, and then we turned the banner so that they couldn't just walk all over us.
yeah, we turn the banner as an actual barricade, kind of.
Yeah. But they did not like it, and I think what triggered it is that they saw there was a lot of reporters there, a lot of photographers for reporting outlets that were taking pictures of our sign. Like they wanted to get a picture of our banner.
And
And I don't think that they did not like that because again, they don't want to engage on the actual medical harms.
I'm so
Because
glad that your approach was to talk about not only the harms to girls, but also the harms to the boys that are being enlisted to violate their sports.
yeah, well, we need to talk about again, we always say this, that it's all downstream of the medicalization of bodies, particularly of children, you know?
I, I felt like I had to have that.
Yeah.
I, they go together. If you don't address it, then I think one of the worst outcomes could be is this concept that the ACLU wins any sort of like idea that, oh, the more you harm the kids, um, then they can participate.
Right.
There was
Right.
a parent, I actually wrote this down. A parent said this last night. A parent with a trans identifying son said, "How disabled does a boy need to be until he is defective enough to be considered a girl?"
I think that was from one of the Supreme Court. I think that was a question posed, wasn't it? By one of the, it wasn't?
Oh
No.
no. No, that was her own thought of, that's how the ACLU is framing this. You
Yeah.
have to disable the boy and be, this is her language.
Yeah, intentionally disabling a child. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody, uh, I mean, sports is not our primary issue because it's the medical, but I've always thought that they're downstream from one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the medical quackery is at the core of the entire issue. So whether
Yeah.
it's sports or parental rights or free speech, I think I'm always going to be wanting to remind people none of this is real. Like this is all flowing from Harry Benjamin's 1966 book, The Transsexual Phenomenon. He was a quack endocrinologist trying to, make some dollars. Like, and I just constantly want to be reminding people that's what we're talking about. It's not some ancient philosophy. It's not a real religion. It's definitely not science. It's just like this guy, Harry Benjamin, and nobody has even improved on his ideas since 1966, except for the genius edition of puberty blockers. Thank you, Peggy Cohn Ketnis. But, like we got to remind people what this actually is. It's not like just to
Yeah.
blow apart the mystique.
Yeah.
Um, I did give a speech at the rally, and um, we have some very strange bedfellows in our movement, but we didn't need any internal police force to make sure we didn't have any conflicts. So there's a win.
Yeah.
Glenna, do you think we're going to be at the Supreme Court again soon for more cases?
Yeah, I think the parental rights cases are bubbling, and we're hoping that the Supreme Court takes one of them. I think it's just barely possible that that would be heard this year, but probably not, probably bumped into next year. And we also have free speech battles all over the country. So there's a Olentangy, we'll find out soon if that school district is appealing. So that was a pronoun case at schools where the school district lost the Sixth Circuit. Next step would be Supreme Court. They have to decide soon whether to seek Supreme Court review. And then there's the pink armband case out of the First Circuit, New Hampshire. That case was argued before the First Circuit, and once we get a decision, we'll see if they appeal to Supreme Court. So yeah, parental rights and First Amendment I have an eye on.
The pink armband, that's the parents of girls that are being forced to compete with boys. They weren't
Yeah.
allowed to even wear just a pink armband in support of their girls because that was
Yeah.
transphobic.
Wow.
Well, it looks like we're gonna have plenty of reason to talk to you going
Again in the
forward.
future.
Gonna have to keep coming back, Glenna. And I will be busy in my process of becoming love and light and joy.
Glenna has no idea what you're talking about.
Well,
No, I
watch the first
definitely
part
don't know
of
why she would be doing that.
watch the first part of the episode and you'll understand.
Okay.
All right, well, that's all for this week, folks, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenna. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Jenna. Jamie. Sorry, Jamie. And then I was gonna say Ichabod, and then I realized it's Dorian. I'm talking to Corey's cats. Never mind. Goodbye.
I
Hi, everyone. Before we go, I just wanted to close with two stories from the Supreme Court this week. First, the turnout. Seeing an entire girls' soccer team travel to the court to stand up for sex-based protections was probably the most powerful thing I felt and saw while I was there. But just as powerful was the growing presence of the Democratic parents who showed up. And you did so because you know this isn't a partisan issue, it's personal. I want to actually give a shout out to Diag this week. You did an extraordinary job of bringing people together, building community, having great signs, and just reminding everybody that showing up in person really matters. I gave a speech at this rally, and honestly, I was really scared to give it But the presence of so many of the diag faces and the LGB faces made it so I knew that I wasn't alone. Second, I just wanted to share that every time we travel, we meet someone who talks to us about how much this podcast means to them. We hear your stories. At the Supreme Court, a woman let me know that she trained for and ran an entire marathon while listening to Informed Dissent on her Saturday runs. Every mile, she said, every Saturday when I was training, I listened to this show. Knowing that we shared even a tiny part in her journey was an honor, truly. I only ran a single mile this morning, so I'm also completely inspired by her accomplishment. We know, because we hear your stories, that listening to you is really not about the news. For you and for us, it's about processing. And a lot of times we've been doing this alone. The stories that we know we don't cover on this show may be the hardest ones of all. It's your loved one's transition, the family conflict, the hope for desistance or detransition. We know that your stories are part of what you're processing when you listen to us discuss the news. You're not invisible here. So thank you for spending part of your week with us. If you want to help grow this work, please share the show, like, comment, subscribe. Independent media like this only works if we build it together. And every single share or every like that you give expands the impact. So, as always, stay informed, stay running, and stay ready to dissent. Thanks.